Everyone laughed at him, but no one knew he was barely holding himself together. The name Don Knotts still echoes with nervous stammers, wide-eyed glances, and a kind of comedy that feels timeless. To millions, he was Barney Fife, the lovable, bumbling deputy who turned fear into laughter on the Andy Griffith Show. 5 Emmy Awards proved what audiences already knew: he was unforgettable. But the applause never told the full story. Behind the laughter was a man quietly fighting battles no one could see. Years later, his daughter Karen finally opened the door to that hidden world, not to change how we remember him, but to help us understand who he truly was. Because behind the comedy was a fragile soul shaped by fear, loss, and a lifetime of anxiety. Don Knotts was born into struggle. Growing up in West Virginia, his childhood was anything but stable. His father's mental health issues created an unpredictable home, and fear became something young Don learned to live with early. While other kids found comfort in family, Don found escape in imagination. He created a ventriloquist dummy named Danny, not just a toy, but a companion. With Danny, he could laugh, perform, and momentarily forget the tension around him. Even then, comedy wasn't just talent, it was survival. But life dealt another devastating blow when his older brother, the one he admired most, died suddenly from an asthma attack. That loss stayed with him. It was the moment he first understood how quickly joy could disappear. And so, Don did what he would do for the rest of his life. He turned pain into performance. By the time he reached adulthood, that nervous energy had become part of him. It wasn't something he could switch off. It followed him everywhere, into auditions, onto stages, and eventually into the role that would define his career. When he became Barney Fife, audiences thought they were watching brilliant acting. But Karen would later reveal something striking. That wasn't just acting. That was him. The stuttering, the anxious pacing, the wide-eyed panic. It all came from a very real place. Every laugh he earned was rooted in something he genuinely felt inside. Comedy became his armor, a way to take fear and make it lovable. And for a while, it worked. At the height of his fame, Don Knotts was one of the biggest stars on television. But success didn't quiet his anxiety. If anything, it made it worse. Long days on set, pressure to perform, and constant worry began to take a toll on his personal life. At home, things were very different from the cheerful world of Mayberry. His daughter remembered a man who was often exhausted, withdrawn, and overwhelmed. The same person who made America laugh would come home drained, sometimes unable to connect. His marriage fell apart under the weight of it all. And even as his career grew, so did his dependence on medication to manage the anxiety that never left him. Still, he kept going. Because performing wasn't just his job, it was the only way he knew how to cope. In a bold move, he left the Andy Griffith Show at the peak of its success, hoping to reinvent himself as a leading man. But audiences struggled to see him as anything other than Barney Fife. The films didn't land the way he'd hoped, and slowly, the spotlight began to fade. That decline hit him hard. Karen later shared something deeply revealing. People loved Barney, but they didn't always know how to love Don. Fame gave him recognition, but it couldn't give him peace. As the years passed, his struggles didn't disappear. They evolved. Health issues, failed relationships, and a lingering sense of loneliness followed him into later life. A diagnosis that threatened his eyesight shook him to his core. For a performer whose expressions were everything, the idea of losing his vision was terrifying. Then came something even worse: lung Later in life, he met a woman who sought past the fame and into the vulnerability he had carried for decades. For the first time in a long time, he found a sense of calm, a kind of peace that had always felt just out of reach. But time was running out. In his final days, surrounded by family, something incredible happened. Even as his body was failing, he was still making people laugh. Karen recalled a moment she would never forget. Her father, struggling to breathe, said or did something so funny that the room burst into laughter. She ran out, overwhelmed, feeling guilty for laughing. But later, she realized something profound. That was exactly who he was. Even at the edge of life, he was still giving the world the only gift he knew how to give: laughter. When Don Knotts passed away in 2006, he left behind more than a legacy of